following is a joint presentation of ManufactureCT and HRP Associates, Inc. This panel on best practices in energy efficiency features industry experts discussing the management of energy costs. The panel was moderated by David DeMaio, president of Pat Munger Construction Company, Inc., and featured as panelists David Stein, AIA and Vice President of Silver, Petrucelli and Associates, Mark McGinley, Vice President of U.S. Green Technologies, and Kyle Ramm, CFO and Vice President of Operations at Titan Energy.
Our mission, just to reiterate, is to have you folks walk away here with some actionable thoughts on how you can possibly improve the energy efficiency of your facility, reduce energy costs. As made it clear, energy in Connecticut is about 55 to 60% higher than most places in the United States, and we rank, I believe, the highest in New England for energy costs, especially electrical costs. Gas, I think we're third or something of that nature. So it's significant, and it's not just a matter of feeling good. It's a matter of profitability for you folks. It's a financial responsibility you have to try and reduce your energy costs, I would think. So we have a great panel here today, and what we tried to capture on the panel was in most endeavors in your business, you probably start with some type of a consultant. So Titan Energy brings that to the table here. Energy consultants, you may reach out to them to kind of do a facility tour, have them look at some of your utility bills and things of that nature, and maybe come up with recommendations on how to reduce some costs that way. They may make recommendations that include envelope improvements. If you're in an older building, you may need windows, insulation upgrades, things of that nature. We've got David Stein from Silver Petrucelli Architects on the board here, a local architectural firm right here in Hamden, travels the state of Connecticut and beyond. You may be reaching out to them for design ideas and improvements in the envelope of your building and beyond. And if solar becomes a piece of the puzzle, we've got Mark McGinley on board here from U.S. Green Technologies. Mark and I have done a lot of solar development together for our clients. What I really like about U.S. Green Technologies is that they're local. A lot of the solar companies swoop into the states that have the best programs at the time, and when the programs are either eliminated, they're gone. And you're kind of left with how do I service my system? Where do I go next? Things of that nature. Mark his business is in Madison. He lives in Madison, Connecticut. He's committed to Madison. So having that local presence is really important to us. So. With that, that's your. I know they gave me bios. That's kind of your introduction to the panel. I've got a series of questions. I've got like 3 general questions that I'm going to present to the panelists here, and then I've got some very specific questions for each panelist, and everybody on the panel will have a chance to maybe add in things of that nature. I'd like the panel to. We have a limited amount of time. We want. Panel, keep your questions your answers as concise as you can. I know it's easy to go down a rabbit hole. And I think overall, I think we agreed that we'll take questions at the end rather than during. So please, jot your questions down if you would, and we'll have some time at the end so we can move it through the questions. So with that, my first question for the board, now for the panel, and anyone could go first, second, third, it doesn't matter. What's the biggest energy saving opportunity you think manufacturers are missing today, and why?
So I think in general, compressed air optimization, leak detection, that's generally a good place to start from an ROI standpoint. I know you mentioned that the lights were done here. A lot of manufacturers have addressed their lights and have switched to LED, but to the extent that there's opportunities to add controls, that can provide additional savings.
I sort of dovetail that with as you're talking, we're also engineers. So as we think about the envelope of the building, we're also thinking about the components that go inside, and all of those are important factors to make a fully energy efficient building. And so you can't just simply take one piece and say we're gonna save energy. Lighting is obviously one piece, and you consume that. But it's the controls of the systems and how you operate that in occupied and unoccupied mode. So even those little subtleties will drastically change your overall use and how you live that building. We sometimes think our buildings are 9 to 5 or, whatever your operations are. So you have to really think about the uses of it and how you control all those components.
With solar, we don't really improve efficiencies of a building. We just help you offset your electrical costs.
Okay, if a manufacturer came to you with $500,000 to invest in energy improvements, how would each of you recommend allocating it across efficiency, upgrades, and solar?
I guess this is. I'll take that. So the areas that I mentioned first, the air compression. The short answer is my background's in finance. Before I started energy, short answer is whatever has the highest ROI from my standpoint. That would depend on the situation. That said, there's some nuances as far as incentive programs and federal tax credits that I'm sure Mark's going to talk about. I won't go into.
I'll answer it from financial perspective too. You have $500,000. I could spend $500,000 on a window, a roof like that, practically, right? So. Yes, 500,000. I would look at where we could spread that out or find one targeted area where you could focus itself on. So if it's sealing the building, looking at doors, those type of things that you can do around the full envelope of the building as opposed to a targeted project, I think that's how you have to think about it because, you do have limited funds. And so for 500,000, I would target smaller things.
Our company does a lot of projects with the Green Bank, Connecticut Green Bank, which they offer some really terrific long-term rates on financing, for projects. It could be a roof, it could be windows, it could be many different things. So when we run our models on a cash investment of $500,000 for solar, with the investment tax credits and the special MACRS depreciation where you could really, if you have a tax appetite, then our returns could be, our ROI could be as high as 25%. But when we leverage it with a loan through the Green Bank, then you might put down 10% of that 500,000. So you might put down 50,000, and then your ROI on that 50,000 could be as high as 200 to 300% a year because of the investment tax credit. So we would go with solar to begin with, and then we'll start looking around the rest of the building.
The third question under this area is, what's one myth about energy projects that manufacturers should stop believing?
So I think what we generally hear is there's a payback period that they need to hit in order for a project to make sense. I guess I'd think about it in a different way in terms of making a long-term investment, making your company more competitive on the national scale. You mentioned energy prices nationally being much lower than they are in Connecticut. So whatever you can do to level the playing field, even if the payback's a little bit longer than what you would like, that's what I would say is consider all things and take a longer term approach on making some of these investments.
I would say our current energy code says to us that we're going to make more energy efficient buildings, but we're actually still consuming considerable amount of energy through that. So those are efficient systems we're putting in our buildings. That doesn't necessarily mean that your overall operation cost or cost of consuming energy goes down that same proportion. So I think that's kind of the myth of that. We could put a very energy efficient air handler unit on the roof, but we're running those a longer amount of time to provide better air quality and so forth. Therefore, you are consuming a lot of energy, and you're not necessarily, that payback is more about just being energy efficient from a mindset perspective.
The next three questions we're going to direct to Kyle, and after Kyle speaks, if you folks want to add anything to embellish on that would be appreciated. So where do you usually find the most low-hanging fruit when conducting energy audits for manufacturing facilities?
We walk into Class A commercial buildings, office space, and look up and not all the time the lights have been done. Building envelope is an area that is for a lot of manufacturers is needed. But other than that, air compression, We're doing a lot of smart motor installations or VFDs. Those tend to have a very good payback and provide a good product for the customer.
I just want to ask a follow-up question before I go to Mark and David. Are there still incentive programs to the utility companies for lighting upgrades and motor upgrades and things of that nature?
Absolutely, and David's been talking about looking at the entire building, when you're looking at incentive programs for efficiency in the state of Connecticut, there are actually bonuses for how comprehensive you are when you evaluate these projects. So if you're going in, and you realize, hey, I haven't switched over to LED yet. I'm going to hire a firm to do that. There'll be bonuses from utility programs that can give you enhanced incentives to pay for those things.
Does Titan Energy shepherd that process for the client?
Absolutely.
That could be pretty arduous and hard to do.
Yeah, so we handle that whole process. We are an SBEA a vendor, which means customers under a certain size are actually eligible for on-bill financing, which is a nice perk, 0% on-bill financing through the utility, and you pay back that project cost on your monthly Eversource or UI bills.
Again, for Mark and David, the question was, where do you usually find the most low-hanging fruit when conducting energy audits for manufacturing facilities? Do you guys have anything you'd like to embellish or add to that?
Just windows, sealing of, so much air leakage you have from, and mainly in the manufacturing world, you are with pre-engineered buildings, or you may be in some older stock type of, generation buildings that aren't very well sealed. You could do a lot for less by just simply sealing up those areas and sort of holding in the energy and so forth. I think lastly, just with roof replacements, that's an important part of your asset is to keep your building dry. By doing a roof replacement, you could definitely increase your R value, increase your overall energy efficiency.
How do utility rate structures and demand charges affect the ROI, return on investment, of energy efficiency versus solar PV?
So Mark's definitely going to have something to say about this. So in general, the kilowatt hour charges on your bill are directly impacted by solar. Mark will probably tell you this, the kilowatt or demand charges on your bill may or may not be as impacted. So if you're looking at offsetting that part, that's usually more directly impacted by efficiency projects, and there are reasons behind that. But in terms of different rate structures or rate classes, there are different commercial rate classes in the state of Connecticut: rate 30, rate 56. Some are on peak, off peak. Rate 30 is just a flat rate. So you have to take a look at all of those things when you're evaluating, either a generation project or an efficiency project. Make sure you're using the appropriate cost to compare when you're calculating all these ROIs.
You're mostly looking at offsetting the supply side of the bill. So with a commercial bill, you have the delivery, the transmission, and that is the cost of maintaining the grid. So when you're doing a commercial project, you're basically, the savings on a net metered project is just offsetting that kWh versus the demand. And that's where batteries are starting to become more acceptable. And there are some programs with the utility where they could actually, you could actually put a battery on your site, and they will actually pay you to access that battery so many days per year, whether it be in the winter or the summer period. And those are worth looking into now, because you could use those batteries to offset your demand. And with controls as well, controls are big because they can also help you address some of the demand issues of your utility bill.
And then the third question under this, for directly to Kyle, can you walk us through a recent success story where a mix of efficiency and renewable dramatically changed a company's energy costs?
Sure. So we've worked with the YMCAs of Connecticut for a long time, throughout the state. But both on the energy procurement side, so helping them purchase electricity through third parties, as well as pursuing energy efficiency and on-site generation projects. We recently completed a project for the Branford YMCA, which I think is about 25 minutes away from here. And they hadn't done their lighting, so we did the lighting. We upgraded their BMS. They had a cogen on site, so that was already addressed. And then they did a front of the meter solar project because the existing load in the facility, once they had the cogen on site, they really they couldn't utilize the whole roof and do a behind the meter project, so they went front of the meter, and they're getting a check from the developer that did it, like a lease, created a revenue opportunity for them. So that was a way that we addressed multiple issues that they were having, both operationally and from an energy standpoint, and then brought the solar project to them, and they actually installed EV chargers at the same time. So that's one that came to mind.
Program for solar in Connecticut has always been a net metering, meaning that you could only put on the building what your load is. So whatever you put on the building, that would offset whatever your load was. So if you had a big warehouse, but your bill was rather small, you'd only be able to use like a small percentage of the roof, to actually benefit from solar. But now that they came in with this buy-all program, it's before the meter, as Kyle suggested. Now even if you have a net metered project that was put in 5-10 years ago, if you have additional roof space, you can now load that up to the max and sell that electricity. Right now, the going rate is 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So when we pencil that into projects, that baby hums. And the beauty is, it has nothing to do with your bill. If your building was sitting empty for whatever reason, you would still get that check every year from the utility company for that electricity that you're producing.
That's a 20-year run on that.
That's a 20-year guaranteed tariff. And we feel after 20 years, because 20 cents in 20 years might be the equivalent of 10 cents today, or maybe less, who knows, that they'll probably still pay after the 20 years, because most of the modules today come with warranties up to 30 years of production. So we think that you'll still get something from the utility. It might not be 20 cents, but it's still going to be a good return on your investment.
Just to dovetail on the solar thing in terms of just successes, I think it's more of a mindset that we automatically say the solar's going on the roof. But I think we're seeing more and more installations of leveraging open areas to use solar, whether it's even over parking areas, over ancillary structures, so forth. So I think if you begin to sort of expand how you can leverage that location, it's not just bound to the roof. So, think of that. Think of those other opportunities that go along with it.
That's a great. That the Milford YMCA actually was just approved for an NRES award to put carports in their parking lot, and the economics to them were significant in terms of tens of thousands of dollars a year that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to capture.
If any of you own rental properties with tenants in it, and you've got an empty roof, there's no reason why you shouldn't be putting solar on that building as part of the buy-all program. And you, as the owner of the building, will get that check. So not only are you renting your building to somebody getting income, your roof is now working for you. And that's money to you. Those are real dollars that come in every year for 20 years. You could take that money and do what you want with it, including upgrading a facility with envelope improvements and things of that nature, lighting. So you can use that cash any way you want. I mean, it's just a great program. And you definitely should think about looking into it. For David, you'll be the primary person here now. How can envelope upgrades like insulation, roofing, or windows affect the manufacturer's bottom line beyond just energy savings?
may not be the bottom line, but it's about just the experience within a building. You insulate your building, it's going to be a quieter building. Okay, I think that serves your staff and people within the building. It also serves, in a manufacturing, you're often bordered against other properties, and that adds sort of an acoustical insulating value. So doing insulation solves a lot of different things than just purely providing you with a tempered building. Roofing beyond, as we look at this, it is beyond just it is beyond just keeping the building dry. Okay, there's the opportunities of tying that into other infrastructure like solar. So when you're designing a roof, you have to think about that, and this is the opportune time to do a roof replacement and parlay that with solar. So there's other things that sort of go along with that.
So again, David, in your experience, what's the smartest first step for an older industrial facility looking to tighten its building envelope?
Yeah, there are always challenges to just re-insulate from the interior around. So I think you look at your windows, you look at the ceilings of any of those openings. That is the most cost-effective, simplest way of identifying visually what those gaps may be and fill those, because it makes a big difference. It's called a crack method that you could run through a calculation and determine how much air leakage is going through your building. You'd be surprised to find what you have in old buildings of where just two materials just sort of moved. You have a slight opening, air infiltration, and you're just throwing your energy essentially out the window.
I know there have been, I don't know if they're still available. Are there federal tax credits for envelope improvements, energy efficient envelope improvements? And how do people apply for those?
They're not specific ones that are targeted just to recalking. It's more of the equipment itself that we're seeing than we are seeing of just tax credits related to. Now, in terms of roof replacement and insulation, there are some credits that go along with that, but unfortunately, I don't see much targeted towards these smaller improvements like windows and doors.
How can envelope upgrades support or enhance the effectiveness of rooftop solar systems?
Well, just even the subtlety of having the right color roof would change drastically even what we're considering on the solar side. So, it's not just put down any membrane. You could put down a proper membrane that will drastically change just even the reflectiveness of the roof, which just by putting a whiter roof that has a higher reflective factor could reduce your overall energy costs significantly. Many old manufacturing buildings would have black roofs. We saw that, the old tar roofs. Well, those just suck up that energy on the top of that roof could be 120 degrees during the summer. By just doing a white roof while you're doing solar, you're sort of solving two things. That roof temperature could go down easily by like 30 degrees.
Mark, what's changed in solar PV technology or pricing in the past 2 to 3 years that business owners should know about?
We used to do projects at $3.50 per watt, and now we're down to like the low twos, $2.10, $2.20. So solar's come a long way. A big part of it is the price of the modules. And so, as long as we're not loading too heavy on the tariffs now that you hear in the news all the time, many of the Eastern countries have set up shops in the United States, Georgia and Florida, to assemble their modules. It's changed a lot, and the whole idea of the early incentives were designed to offset the high cost of actually the capital cost, CapEx. And now that CapEx has come down, they're kind of taking away the incentives year by year. So it's always good to do a project today versus tomorrow, because every year in 10 years they've taken away the incentives. So whatever incentives we have left now, you should try to take advantage of them.
When I first started at Titan, I was talking to a solar developer, and he said, there's never been a better time to do a solar project. And looking back on it, the interest rates were low. There was enough progression on the cost of the panels. This was when we were in the ZREC program rather than NRES program. And in Connecticut, incentives were much higher. The ITC, from a federal standpoint, was there. And at the time, I chuckled. I was like, he's pushing his product, but it was looking back on it, he was exactly right. These incentives aren't meant to last forever. It's meant to get the technology to an affordable place for the market. And back when he told me that, it was certainly a sweet spot in the solar. Not that it isn't now, but there's obviously some things going on in the incentive world out there.
I would say we're now embarking on the perfect time to do solar. And the reason why is most of our mechanical equipment is going more electrified. Right, we're trying to decarbonize and go carbon neutral, and what better way to think of it? Not just that this is going to reduce my bottom line of my energy bill. What it's really doing is offsetting the energy that's coming from energy efficient electrical equipment. So the two really dovetail very well together.
Yeah. Plus the buy-all, you might be saving through netting. You might be saving 12 cents per kilowatt hour against your bill, but with the buy-all being paid 20 cents per kilowatt hour, it's going to take a long time for that 12 cents, even at like a 3% cost of living or COLA, put on that to reach the 20 cents. So, right now the buy-all is a great way to take that money and use it for other things, whatever you can glean from it.
It's sort of a little off topic, but the battery piece is going to be a game changer if it could be engineered to a point that you can store that energy and feed it back into your facility.
Yeah. Anyone that will dissect your bill will point out your demand charges, and that's where the batteries really come into play. So they're here now. Batteries are here, and they're it took a little while to get to the proper price points, but now they're here, and they come with some warranties that they didn't have before as well. So worth looking at batteries. Solar plus batteries work very well together.
I was going to add one thing. So we were an early adopter to solar in 2008. I did my first system on our place of business, and it was over $12 a watt in 2008. And there was no tax credits. We had to apply for a grant, which was a pittance compared to what we spent for it. But that's when we dipped our toe in the water on solar to offer it, as a value add to our clients. But it was a lot of money then. But it's performed perfectly. So, anyways. Next question, Mark. For facilities with limited roof space or aging roofs, what are the creative solar options that still make financial sense?
I always like to cover the parking lots before I cover a piece of green land because, like I said, the employees they like it a lot.
I think you could be creative too. Those could be sunshades around the building that could be mounted on. We often see awnings. Reduces solar gain in big areas. You may have windows, so it sort of serves two purposes. So I think there's other creative ways like carports to find little nooks and crannies and good orientation that you could place solar.
Mark, what's your opinion of solar fenestrations like awnings and things of that nature? Because they were kicking around for a while. Any even like siding, vertical siding was being thought about as being impregnated with solar panels or things like that.
A lot of technologies. I think in Germany there's a new type of kind of like a blanket that you can hang off your balcony, but funny that. But over in Europe it's a little cheaper for solar, and electricity prices are through the roof. If you think you have it bad in America, take your bill and double it over in Europe, okay? So I I haven't seen any of that from a practical standpoint yet in the United States, but I'm sure we will down the road.
How do you approach designing a system that balances both current load, offset, and future growth of electrification?
So recently, a lot of companies were looking to replace furnaces with heat pumps. So when we size a project and it's a netting project, we usually have to have an engineer do some projections for the added load that might come along. It could be EV charging in your parking lot, it could be heat pumps. So we usually need to actually provide that to the utility company anyways, even to get a project approved. So we need a letter from an engineer that is going to look at the equipment being installed and then calculate the future load. And then with that, the utility will allow us to oversize the system in a netting program.
I would just say it goes both ways, where if you're adding load to a building and you might be growing and anticipate adding load, and you can, in that case, submit to oversize the project. It could go the other way, where if you haven't done certain efficiency projects in your building and you're planning to, it's a good idea to figure out what load that will take away before you pay for those extra panels on top of your roof, or think about the design a little bit differently. So we've certainly seen situations where customers have, and it's not. Doesn't impact solar as much, but there are other technologies from like a cogen perspective where a customer installs a cogen and then they do lighting project, bunch of efficiency project, and all of a sudden that cogen's not running the way it should. So just other things to think about when, I would just have a longer term view and a plan when you're thinking about, a generation project.
When we went into buildings before, we would notice that the lighting wasn't upgraded. And so we would want to figure that out. Now with the buy-all, we don't worry as much about that because you're getting a higher rate and you're loading up your roof and you're maximizing what your roof can produce. So it's not as big of a deal anymore.
Yeah.
So you could load up your roof, you can maximize your revenue, and at the same time, Kyle and his team is going to be out there looking for ways to reduce your existing utility bill. And that's the best form of being green, is reducing what you're consuming.
With any incentive, and from an architect and an engineer's perspective, you always need to sort of forecast growth with that. So and what's balanced there. So whether you just put some infrastructure in place in the switchgear to allow for future expansion, those type of forethought is needed as opposed to just tackling one project at a time. So, step back from that and sort of ask those questions, bring in the expertise to think about what other infrastructure you can put in now that's cost effective that you may not necessarily need to do. And I'm using the example of switchgear because that ties into expansion of other equipment and so forth. I think will provide you some savings if you do that early on.
Kyle, this one's for you, and the others, obviously, Mark and David, feel free to chime in. What does a truly integrated energy strategy look like? Where do you see all three of the disciplines up here intersecting most effectively?
I think it's you have to look at all of these things combined for a truly integrated plan. You need to take a look at building envelope. You should take a look at how you can influence how much energy you're using within your facility, within your operation, and then figure out how you buy less from the grid. The EIA put out a study. You mentioned high energy costs. The EIA put out a study that says states with high energy costs are going to grow at a faster rate than states with lower energy costs. So I don't see that if you're continuing to buy from the grid. I don't see that problem going away. So by addressing everything at once and all these things really. And the other thing that I mentioned, I don't think I've mentioned, but we got our start in buying third-party supply and brokering those deals for for clients and being a consultant on that side of it. So even after you've done all this, it's likely that you're going to still buy from the grid. So make sure you have a strategy doing that as well.
Any one of you any one of you can chime in on this. How can a manufacturer know when to prioritize envelope upgrades before or after solar?
I think if you have an old roof, you're best to upgrade that and address that before you do solar, and that's really kind of a no-brainer. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it solves so many things. So you got to invest in your building. When it's aging, plan ahead for that. Do that, and that will set you up. While you're doing that, if you know you're doing solar, you need to plan for that accordingly. Okay, there's definitely certain systems that don't have the full capability of bringing solar onto it. There's certain flat roofs with the insulation and so forth, they just don't have the PSI to handle it. So we've had some clients that have done repairs, re-roofs, so forth, and then they're planning to do solar, and we come to them and said, fortunately, we got to pull some stuff off to put some new stuff on just to support that new. So you're going to definitely spend the time to think about what may come in the future.
We won't do a solar project unless we know that roof has 25 years left in it, So it just doesn't make any sense. It's a lot of work to go up and remove modules and take them off, work on a roof and put them back on again. And you're not going to get all the tax breaks for that part of it. So you'll deduct it probably from your business expenses. But obviously the roof, I think the roof, everyone feels good when they get a new roof, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
And this may be a little redundant, but let's just go through it. Are there common pitfalls when businesses pursue energy projects in silos? And how can owners avoid those?
There are, we've seen pitfalls and we've seen silos of organizations. There's certain teams that are handling a solar project, certain teams that are handling their energy contracts. And the energy contracts, depending on, what you've, what you may have entered into, may have termination fees if you lower your load by a certain amount. So that's something that you really need to plan ahead for, and that's easy to get in front of as long as you are. But if teams are operating in silos, it can be a pitfall. The other one that I mentioned earlier was, if you're considering a generation project, whether it's solar, cogen, fuel cell, whatever it is, you should really have a roadmap to know what other things are happening with your facility, whether it's growing the electrical load at the facility or potentially decreasing it. So you're making sure you're sizing everything correctly.
One pitfall that I unfortunately see more and more is when there's expansion onto a building and there's other renovations that are going on. That solar often is then disconnected and it's no longer producing because there's just a certain phase and sequence of construction that happens. And now you have this solar and it can't work. It's got to be disconnected. It's got to be removed, relocated, repositioned. So just thinking of how you may be able to segregate that if you have some long-range master planning going on, that may avoid some of that pitfall of you just put this in 5 years ago, but now for the next 6 months, I'm no longer in production of solar. That's a tough one. And when construction elongates and you're expecting it to be done earlier, there's a lot of angst with that because you're just anxious to get this thing back up and running.
Listen, I appreciate everybody's participation. We've hit the 9:30 so mark, and be respectful to Bert's time. They're going to do some tours of the facility, if you wish, and learn more about their business. I thank the panel for your valuable insight and information that you've shared. Hopefully, you folks are all coming away with some thoughts and ideas, and feel free to reach out to anybody on the panel or myself, and we'll get you connected. Again, thank you to Bert for hosting, for Karen and Liz from Munger, to our staff for putting this together, and enjoy the tour and the rest of your day.